How about that moon, huh? Well, guess who decided to show up in our reading today? A lot of people have been posting pictures of the moon because it feels so bright right now. And it's in an interesting place in our zodiac system. The opening card that we have for today is the Queen of Cups. We have the challenge today coming in as the Four of Swords. The way that we're going to get through the challenge came in as the High Priestess. And then we have the final outcome as the moon. So a couple of major arcanas today and some interesting energies being brought up by way of what we've all been experiencing and what we're all working through. So right now, the moon is in a position where it's approaching a conjunction with the planet of Saturn. And this is interesting because Saturn is a planet of limitation and also authority, right? And we have our moon being transiting this area. So it's like our emotional nature is looking over where we have these limitations in our lives, and we're reflecting on this, and we're working with this quite a bit. Now consider that the Queen of Cups, which we have as our opening card, is a water-governed card. It's speaking to the energy of Cancer, which is actually cardinal water, which would be creative or active emotion. And right now, we have the planet of Venus in Cancer, which is in opposition to the planet of Pluto, which we have over in Capricorn. Now, Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's been creating a lot of shifts and changes in our social structure, because that is what Capricorn as a sign governs in larger scale. However, it's also affecting us in a personal way wherever Capricorn is in your natal chart. So if we have this square relationship or opposition relationship between planets, it creates some kind of friction and tug of war. You can consider, two people or two energies kind of pulling at one another. But Venus is more transitory because it has a smaller orbit in comparison to Pluto, and it takes a little over a year to go around the whole zodiac system, whereas Pluto, in comparison, has been in Capricorn since 2008 and will continue to be in Capricorn until 2024. And we saw the biggest shifts happen in 2020 when we actually had this big meeting of planets, also known as a stellium, in the same degree point as Pluto. So we can start to see how these transits are affecting us on a large scale and also on a very personal scale. So Cancer as a sign, right, is the sign of the womb, the sign of the mother, the sign of nurturing, the sign of instinct. When you consider active emotion, the mother disciplines their child so that they can protect them from being endangered, and they make sure that they're fed well and that they have safety in the home. And it's interesting, right? Because as a sign, Cancer is governed by the symbol of the crab, which kind of moves to things from a side to side way. It doesn't move toward things in a straight way. So we may be getting some perspective if we just kind of take a couple steps to the side of our situation and really kind of gain a little bit of viewpoint that gives us a range of perspective instead of being so identified with the situation. And so I think it's also bringing us a lot of compassion by way of what we've been working through in all the shifts and changes in our personal lives and also in our environment and in, society in general, and also on the global scale. We see these big shifts happening. And the question is, what is brewing inside of you that's being called to be born, right? Which brings us to the challenge today, which is the long question. We have the Four of Swords showing up as our challenge, and we see that there's a person who's colored in shades of gray, laying horizontally inside this building, and there's a sword lying underneath them, and then above them there's these three swords that are framed. And swords in the tarot are speaking to ideas, conversations, ways that we look at things by way of the mind. And what it brings up for me is how much our movement is oftentimes conditioned by ideas that we've had or been given to when we were growing up by way of, our parents' influence and, our friends' influence and our different experiences that we have in life, and this idea of what we should do, right? Because we have an interesting relationship happening between Saturn and the moon right now, and what we actually feel called to do. And so we see that there's this sword underneath this person and three swords above them, and yet in their hands, which are in prayer position, there's this leaf that's growing. And so it's very telling of the powers of the mind and where we put the mind and how much we can encourage ourselves or limit ourselves by way of what we think possibility is. And so our challenge today, and that's coming up, and I think we're getting some perspective on, is around this long question. Where do we put our thoughts and where do we feel really called to? Because ultimately, our thoughts create our reality, for better, for worse, right? If you are focusing on something that causes you angst, it will get bigger. And if you're focusing on something that brings you gratitude and joy and excitement, that also will begin to grow. So we're working with this way that we have certainty by way of the mind, like what's solid and what is in becoming because of that. Now, this brings us to the High Priestess, which is the way that we're going to get through the challenge today. The High Priestess is another card that speaks to the energies of the moon and the importance of allowing things to reveal themselves in time, right? Because she is sitting and waiting, and she's sitting very astute with two pillars on either side of her, one black, one white, and inside of her cape, she has the Torah, which is the secrets of the universe. And there's so much information that we can actually gather and understand by way of, our emotional body and where that energy in motion calls us to put our attention to. And yet there's also this importance of understanding this quality of water and how it shifts and changes form in our world, right? Because we have water that can be fluid, we have water that can be solid, and we have water that can actually be evaporated into the air, which happens in the global or, earth system of distillation when we have rain. And so we have these three different movements of water, and oftentimes not only do we see that this happens in our outer environment, but it also happens within us. And so there is this period of waiting and allowing things to be revealed and information being brought to you. And it's particularly interesting to me that we are in this point right now that the moon is waxing, right? It's gaining in light because it's moving into a 180-degree angle from the sun. So we can see the sun's light reflected on the moon's surface, and it gives us perspective. It allows us to see things within the dark, quite literally, that we haven't ever been able to see before, and without that reflection. And so it causes us to look inwardly for information and to pay attention to our intuition and listen to it. Now, the ultimate outcome that we have for today came in as the moon, right? Highlighted once again. This card is also signaling the energy of Pisces, and we have Neptune over in Pisces right now. That's in retrograde. We also have Jupiter moving into or it is in retrograde, approaching Pisces right now. And Neptune is this idea of like things that can look a lot bigger and can be kind of out of focus. You know, it's like that which is unknown. There's like this illusion to some places that we take our mind. And it's also bringing up this idea of like how we can let fear of the unknown get in our way of taking a step forward towards that which we are called to move toward. So this is pretty interesting to me because we have, you know, this movement of the moon, right? And when the moon is full, it will be in Aquarius, right? In direct opposition to the sun, which is in Leo right now. And it will be passing over the sign or the planet of Saturn. And so we have this interesting energy happening where, like today, Venus is in opposition to Pluto, and then the moon is going to be in opposition to the sun, which it will put it in Aquarius in a conjunction with Saturn. So we're getting this review over where we perhaps limit ourselves that aren't necessarily useful to us, and how that can be a matter of how we interact the mind and the emotional body in our own system. And so a lot of this, I think, is revealing things to us, you know, not just by like what's going on in the world, right? Because there's a lot of things that are happening geopolitically and even within the United States right now where a lot of illusions are being revealed. And we are also seeing where we perhaps led ourselves down this path of like, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I will be here at this time in my life. And how much that's been misleading us and taking us off of our path that we're actually here on the earth to walk towards, which is telling in this card because we see, you know, this little crustacean going up this golden path through these two canine-like creatures, one a domesticated dog and one a wild wolf, right? And following this scarab, which scarabs are carrying food into the next life, and going up this mountain where we see this kind of glowing light. So what are you being called to move toward? This is being revealed to you right now, and I encourage you to drop the fears and the limitations that you put in front of you and to walk purposefully along your path, because wherever you feel unsure right now, there's more information behind that. And as long as you focus on what you feel unsure about or unknowing about, there's a lot of trepidation to move forward. But I think the cards that are coming in today are reminding us that if we've been sitting with a question for a long time, something is growing out of that. And we will know how to move towards it, likely in the next couple of days. Now consider also that we are getting ready to have Mars go into its shadow before it goes into retrograde in a month or so. And so this is a very active time to engage things and to start things or launch things that you want to begin, because Mars is in this forward moving motion. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like right now we're collecting the information and the sense of direction so that we can have the impetus in our own being in regard to where we need to act and where we need to apply our will. So interesting stuff. Yeah, I think it's so interesting how much the transits are coming in and the cards, particularly in this poignant time. I have had friends ask me to put together a webinar or something for them to actually learn how to look at their charts and read their natal charts. So that is in the gear shifts of my mind as far as something that I can create for people, as well as other classes and things that I can offer to you as well. So I appreciate you reaching out and giving me feedback around things that you'd like to learn more about, because it shows me how you appreciate me showing up in the world. So thank you so much. I will see you again soon. I hope you have a blessed day, and that you are getting all the insights that you need. Be well.